Hey everyone, welcome back to Television Lit Review. My name is Elizabeth, and today we are beginning our exploration of the TV show Supernatural from a literary analysis perspective. So we're starting off today in the pilot episode, and I'm going to take a little extra time in the pilot episode as it introduces us to the world and the characters and the tone and the themes that we're going to be seeing throughout the series. It's rich in symbolism and metaphor and analogy. There's just a lot there to talk about. There's a lot there to unpack, and you can really see what Eric Kripke was trying to do with this pilot. He is a master. He's a genius. We're gonna go ahead and jump into some of the symbolism, and you can decide for yourself. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about setting. So right at the beginning of this episode, we see that it takes place in Lawrence, Kansas, 22 years ago. This is a prologue. It's not part of the story proper. Our main characters are going to be fundamentally different, but it is important information to have, and it gives us an understanding of possibly what's going to happen or where our main characters are coming from. Now, Lawrence, Kansas, immediately when you think of Kansas, simple life, strong people, strong morals, strong values, strong community, and that kind of idea, removed from the major hubs of I guess, society. Now, I pulled up some statistics on Lawrence specifically. As of the 2000 census, there were 80,098 people, 31,388 households, and 15,725 families residing in the city. Superman was raised in Kansas. And this may or may not have anything to do with it, but I appreciated maybe the implication that we have some superheroes being raised here. Another big thing that I saw immediately in this opening shot was that there are a lot of bare tree branches. Late fall and autumn is the time when the earth appears to lose its life. This is very symbolic in literature of the transition period between life and death. You can see the shadows of the tree branches they look like fingers, and they're kind of coming over and kind of enclosing around the house. We're going to talk about houses and homes for a second, and this is very important for the pilot episode. First, you got to think about what the purpose of a house or a home is. It's supposed to be a safe environment. It keeps you physically safe, but it also represents mental safety and emotional safety. And it reflects who lives there and what they want and what they need and the kinds of relationships that they have. It represents family and safety and security. The state of a house represents, the state of these concepts. Death is coming for all of those things. All right, the next big thing that we can talk about in this prologue is the concept of light and darkness. We got a good primer on what light and darkness represent in this world here in the prologue, but light and darkness are used throughout the entire series of Supernatural, so this is a really important one to understand. Now, in general, we associate light with goodness and we associate darkness with evil. But why is that? Light gives us the ability to see things for what they are. And conversely, in low light situations, you can't see what's happening. The presence of light is symbolic of knowledge and of understanding. And the absence of light or darkness is symbolic of misunderstanding or ignorance. Closely associated with this are eyes. The organ, our eyes. Their only job is to take in light and transmit the light signals into the brain for interpretation. So why is darkness associated with evil? Why does darkness scare us? Why is it a creepy concept? Without the light available to see what's going on, something really bad might happen. It might happen to us, and we would possibly never see it coming. So that's why darkness scares us. This is actually where stories with supernatural elements originate. When something happens that you don't understand or you can't explain it, we try to make sense of it. We kind of try to come up with ideas that would explain what's happening, and we speculate about things that happen in the dark, specifically when we can't see what's going on. Maybe it's ghosts. This is where supernatural stories, spooky stories, campfire stories, if you will, where those come from. They come from a misunderstanding about things that are going on and a lack of a better explanation. So in this prologue, they're using light and dark very liberally and very specifically. It's also dark in Sam's room, and Mary sees a shadowy figure. She assumes that it's John. She doesn't know actually who it is. Immediately after that, we see the lights flickering. Ooh, that was thunder. This is where knowledge and misunderstanding kind of come together and war with each other. Take a look at what you think you know and realize that what you think you know and what's actually happening are probably going to meet in the middle. And she comes out of Sam's room and sees the flickering light, and then immediately after that flickering light, she realizes that John is downstairs asleep in his chair. Ooh, that thought of something, unknown in my kid's room, that wakes me out. I want to point out a few, minor details that you may have missed before. When we first meet John, his shirt says USMC, US Marine Corps. Soldiers represent honor, duty, fighting the good fight. But along with that comes strictness, of harshness, of orderliness, in a way that can be, very damaging to somebody who's not suited to it. The TV was playing what looked to be a graphic wartime movie or TV show, and that's very indicative of what's going on. Mary is wearing a white nightgown. Now, white represents three major things, and we'll just go through them in order. The first, and probably the most common use of the color white, is innocence or purity. And that actually links with the second one, which is marriage. So when you see a woman wearing a white gown or a white dress of some kind, you immediately think of marriage. But just know that, two of the major things that white represents are also very closely linked together, and that is innocence or purity and marriage. The third one is one that's a little bit lesser known, but white, especially in ancient Greece, white was associated with motherhood. And the reason why is because white was the color of a mother's milk. It is a symbol of a good mother. However, Mary's white nightgown doesn't stay white. When she's on the ceiling, the white nightgown is stained with blood. It indicates that her image of being a good wife and a good mother is tainted by what the blood represents. So what does blood represent? That's our next question. What does blood represent? Blood itself represents life. Blood is the essential life force. It is your vitality. It is your essence of being. The literary use of blood, where you're seeing the blood or in what context you're seeing the blood, is more important than the blood itself. So if you're willingly donating blood, for instance, that's not really a scary thing. I mean, if you're afraid of needles, it's scary. If you're receiving blood, whether willing or not, you're receiving more life force into yourself. If you're getting a blood transfusion in a medical setting, then that donated blood is being used for what it's supposed to be used for. This is a positive thing. In vampire stories, however, vampires forcibly take blood from somebody else. That's a bad thing. Now, if you're seeing blood in great amounts and it's not where it's supposed to be, if you're seeing a spurt of blood, or in this case, you're seeing blood on Mary's abdomen there, it's not where it's supposed to be, and that means that somebody's life force is being drained away. That's a scary thought to us. That concept of a life force staining your character, staining your purity, your image as a good wife and a good mother, that's something that needs to be paid attention to. We also see that blood is dripping down into Sam's crib here. That's an early indication that Sam has been corrupted by the blood. The blood is calling into question the characterization of two of our characters here. So the symbolism of fire, it's manifold. Because fire gives off light, it can have the same symbolic meaning of knowledge and understanding that generic light does. Another use of fire in literature is fire as power, just raw power. Fire can be very destructive if it's not managed properly. So fire represents power and strength, but it needs to be managed closely. And obviously in this case, it's used in a way that is destructive rather than beneficial. Fire is also commonly a symbol of passions. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Passions are not necessarily a bad thing. But if they're not watched and kept in check, they can become destructive. And it usually happens in the form of obsessions or addictions. That's, where that connotation of hell as basically a big cage of fire, that's where that came from. That's because that's where people who have strong passions or desires that are consuming them, that are dangerous or destructive, that's where they go to be burned by their own passions for the rest of all eternity. That's where that comes from. John has now been enlightened to the existence of the supernatural. So that light that the fire is giving off, that is symbolic of John now understanding that there are supernatural things out there. He hands Sam off to Dean to take outside. He's symbolically handing off his responsibility. He said, this is your responsibility now. Not only is it Dean's responsibility to take care of Sam, but it's Dean's responsibility to take care of himself as well, because John turned around and he went back inside to take care of Mary. This is foreshadowing for, the rest of the first 5 seasons. We see that in season 4, especially when Dean has to carry Sam away from the fire again, a different kind of fire, the fire of passions and obsessions and addictions. Even more telling here is that John runs back into the fire for Mary, also symbolically running into his passions towards his obsessions regarding Mary and away from his responsibilities as a father. He's not going to let this drop. He's going to do everything in his power to find out what just happened and to avenge Mary's death. This is the moment when this whole family got entangled with the supernatural. We talked about the house before, what it represents and how it is an indicator of the status of the family, of the sense of safety and security and all of that. Well, now the house has been destroyed, and not only that, it's been destroyed by fire. All of the things that the house represents, the safety, the security, sense of belonging, something that children especially need, that's gone now. Now we're getting into the actual story. We have this tag, says 22 years later, Stanford University. Sam says, you know how I feel about Halloween? We know it's Halloween. Who's gonna die this time? It's clearly Sam's home, where he has a sense of family. That would be his girlfriend, Jess. He has safety, has security. We are seeing Sam's status quo. We're seeing Sam in his element, in the life that he has constructed for himself. We have another clothing detail here that I think is particularly clever. We have Jess's shirt. This is not a coincidence, and it needs a second look here. The shirt shows 2 Smurfs kissing, all right? That's what the original shirt looks like. But the, cut down the front of her shirt divides these 2 up perfectly. We have a romantic couple here that is divided. Jess and Sam are going to be separated. Now, couple that with the fact that we know that we're in, on Halloween, we know we're in fall. We have some strong indicators here that Jessica is not going to survive this episode. What would I do without you? Crash and burn. They never say that unless someone's about to die. So our next little bit here is that the monster on the recording that Dean shows him, the monster says, I can never go home. The monster they are hunting is not currently at home. And again, home represents family, safety, security, etc., etc. They can never go home, which means that they can never have that. The big question is why? Why doesn't she have that? Why can't she have that ever again? This little detail here indicates already that a monster is never just a monster. And they hold up a mirror for us as human beings and to our characters as human beings. The first time we see her, she asks him to take her home. At the base of it, she just wants to go home. She sees the house, and the house is in shambles. It's in complete disarray. We got weathering, you have rot going on. It's literally falling apart. And that shows that the family, safety, security, etc. that she once may have had is completely gone. We have another clothing detail here. The ghost's dress is white. She's wearing a white dress again. And this, had a similar indication that we had with Mary wearing a white dress. The big difference here is that her dress is torn and frayed and dirty. Her status as a wife and a mother has been corrupted somehow. She is not a good wife or a good mother anymore. We have light and darkness again, and this is going to be pretty brief. We already talked about what light means and what darkness means and the meeting in the middle. But what we see here is something new. We see the use of light and dark to differentiate between the investigative phase and the hunting phase. So the daylight hours are for investigating. It's for gathering information. Nighttime or dark hours of the day are for confronting the bad guys. They have to go into the darkness. They have to go into the unknown. There's always still jump scares. There's still, the element of surprise, and sometimes there's even a big plot twist that you weren't expecting that happens, in the dark. Now, there's one more big point of symbolism that I want to talk about for the pilot episode. We're going to talk about the bridge. The purpose of a bridge, it closes the gap between 2 opposite sides. What this symbolizes in literature is the meeting point or an ability to communicate between two opposites. And when the boys go out onto the bridge and they get their first view of Constance Welch, she's dead, technically. She's in the veil, she hasn't fully crossed over, but she's dead. And they are, coming in contact with her for the first time. So across a barrier. But what Constance does here, and what she did, how many years before, she jumped off the bridge. That's an action that you take when you don't want to communicate with the other side, or you don't want to go from one side to the other. Now, interestingly, we see one other confrontation happen on the bridge, and that would be the argument between Sam and Dean. Sam and Dean are complete opposites, not just in their personalities, but they have different ideas about what to do about John and what to do about Mary. We have the past and the future. We have the idea of living in life versus living in death. They were entangling themselves in Mary's death and in the deaths of other people while they're hunting other monsters. But Sam doesn't want to do that. He wants to live in life. These are some major opposing ideas or beliefs that these two brothers have, and they argue about them on the bridge. And it even turns physical. Constance Welch interrupts them, and for one reason or another, they end up jumping off the bridge. Huge symbolism there for how their relationship is currently going. What is the purpose of Constance Welch's story? What is the symbolic meaning of Constance Welch's ghost? Her husband, her spouse, he had an affair with another woman. He had a desire, or a passion, if you will, that caused him to do something wrong that hurt somebody else. She lost her husband to another woman. She had a strong, unhealthy, destructive emotion that drove her to kill her own children. And after that, she develops a destructive obsession with weeding out all the adulterous men that she can find. Even after she kills herself, she has this obsession that keeps her anchored to earth. She's trapped in between life and death because of this obsession that won't let go of her, and she won't let go of it, and she's going around just perpetuating the cycle. Sam realizes this. He realizes right then what he has to do to break this cycle in her head. She's released from the veil and allowed to go to the other side. Let's compare to John's story. And you're gonna think I'm crazy for a second, but just go with me here. We get confirmation later on that Mary is at fault. She had a desire for John to live, and it caused her to make a deal with Azazel. That is why all of this happened in the first place. As a result of her decision there, John lost his wife, which lit his obsession to find the thing that killed her. John's obsession robbed his sons of a normal childhood and reduced their chances to have safety, security, and happiness. John's obsession soon expands to all supernatural creatures, and he becomes a hunter trapped in the space between the natural and the supernatural, just like Constance was trapped in the space between life and death. Because his story and Constance's match up so far, I think Kripke was trying to imply what John is going to have to do in order to find his own peace. The ending that Constance had, facing her children, that's what John's going to have to do in order to find his own peace. Peace is not going to come from finding Mary's killer. That's what he wants to do. That's his obsession, but that's not where he's going to find his peace. He needs to come face to face with his children, and more importantly, he needs to come face to face with the wrongs that he's done to them in order to break free of his own private circle of hell. Constance's story here is pure foreshadowing. How is John going to end his own story? All right, so that wraps up our symbolism and deeper meaning segment of the pilot episode of Supernatural. I am going to do one more video on the pilot episode because it is the first episode of the entire series, and I'm going to focus on Sam and Dean's characterizations. I'm going to dig into what makes them tick, what they want, what their strengths are, and what their weaknesses are, and things like that. We get a really good view of both of them in this episode. I'm also going to go into story structure and how that relates to the characters' strengths and weaknesses and how the characters evolve through story structure. We're going to get into that in my next video, and I hope to see you there. If you liked what you see, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe down below. Go ahead and leave a comment if you like, if you think that I missed something, or if you have something that you would like to say about any of these symbols that I talked about today. I hope to see you guys all real soon. Bye.